The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. The UK has done something interesting and by many measures controversial when it comes to organ donation. Organ donation in England has moved to an opt-out system where instead of saying that the default is you are not an organ donor unless you opt in, they are changing it where you are considered to have agreed to be an organ donor when you die, unless you have recorded an opt-out where you say, I want to be excluded from organ donation. And there will be, the concerns were some people have religious reasons why they don't want to be organ donors, or whoever knows there are also conspiratorial ideas that when doctors see that you're an organ donor, they choose to let you die instead of someone else because they want to get that sweet, sweet organ money or whatever the case may be. For whatever reason, if you want to opt out, you would still be allowed to opt out, but it becomes opt out instead of opt in. And a lot of people are absolutely furious about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as the opting out is an easy process, then I'm in favor of this change because there are a shortage of organs, and sometimes we need those for transplants, and this would be a way to make it so that we have more hearts and kidneys and lungs and all those types of things. So in that sense, I am in favor of it as long as you can easily opt out. I guess, the devil's advocate argument you could make for us as liberals is that typically progressives say that you have the right to your own body, and that's the argument that we make when we talk about abortion and drug use and prostitution and other things. So is it, in any way contradictory to say that we're in favor of the government having the right to your organs by default when you die, but we're, opposed to the government infringing on personal rights when it has to do with your body for other reasons?
Well, so let's go through some counter arguments to that. I mean, one would be it's not really the government that is getting the right to your organs. The government is facilitating that the healthcare system and humanity is going to be able to benefit from the fact that you are deceased and your organs may be useful to save other lives. So I think that's more of like a technical argument. This is still administered, of course, by the government. It's government documents. It's the NHS, National Health Services Organ Donor Register that is in play there. The argument just about having an absolute right over your body, you still have the choice as to whether you do or don't want to participate. What's changed is if you do nothing, you're in, whereas before, if you did nothing, you were out. And yeah. I really have mixed feelings about it in the sense that I think a lot of people, expecting everyone to now take this administrative step, a lot of people just aren't going to do it because they're too busy, they won't hear about it, et cetera. So it seems a little bit unfair. But at the same time, there are lots of people who have no ideological problem with organ donation. We could save a lot of people with it, but they never get around to opting in.
Yeah, maybe it's because it's the type of thing that you don't want to think about. If you're renewing your license, you may not want to have to check off that box that says that you want to be an organ donor, because that's not the type of thing that you want to think about at that moment. You don't want to contemplate your own death. So yeah, I brought up that argument just to play devil's advocate. I don't think it's the most solid thing, especially because you can't sort of opt out of being against these abortion restrictions and drug use restrictions and prostitution restrictions like you can with the organ donation. I think it's definitely going to be a controversial move, and you're right that a lot of people won't hear about the change because not everyone follows the news as closely as we do. So they may not be very happy when they find out that they were automatically opted into being a donor. But as long as they publicize this and you can opt out easily, I'm in favor of this change.
Now, I have to admit, I have never opted in to be an organ donor for exactly the reason that you just said, which is like today I'm not thinking about it. When I most recently renewed my license and I got one of those real IDs, I sat and waited for an hour at AAA, and then it took forever. I was tired. I was exhausted. I was frustrated. And then it comes up, did you want to check off to be an organ donor? I was not in the right state of mind then to say, is this something that now I want to do? And that is exactly what has kept me from doing it. I have no ideological opposition, but to take out of my day to just go and opt in never really is something that I do. And having to decide on the spot also feels a little bit weird.
Yeah, I am an organ donor. I wasn't when I first got my license for whatever reason. Now I am. And, I'm not a religious person. I don't think that I'll need my organs once I die. So I'm perfectly fine with other people using them.
Yeah.
But is there any reason why you didn't just instinctually think, oh, yeah, I'll be an organ donor? Why not?
I mean, I don't have any religious reasons either not to do it. I guess I just don't know. It just felt like something I should really devote more thought to than just to say to the AAA guy, yeah, sure, bopped me in right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you had your organs for 35 years, except your appendix.
Right.
Um,
The appendix, is
so,
the appendix an organ? I don't even know that.
yeah, I think it's a vestigial organ, yes.
Okay.
So,
Love it.
you were able to part with that one
Yes.
just fine, but these other ones you want to keep.
Unfortunately, nobody can make use of the appendix, which I no longer need or can tolerate as of October 2nd, 2019. Okay, let's talk about gyms a little bit. Yesterday, Pat and I discussed, I don't actually remember if it was on the bonus show or before or after we filmed it, but we talked about gyms. And Pat has a gym membership. I have a gym membership. And of course, our gyms have been closed. Here in Massachusetts, gyms will not be allowed to open until what is called phase 3. Now, we will be in phase 1 for at least 3 weeks and in phase 2 for at least 3 weeks, meaning the earliest possible time that gyms would be allowed to open would be 6 weeks from 2 days ago, Monday. I got an email from my gym a few days ago saying they are very actively preparing for whenever that reopening comes, and they will be keeping everybody very, very safe. In New Jersey, state guidelines do not yet allow gyms to open either. But one gym in Belmar, I believe that's how it's pronounced, Belmar, New Jersey, decided to open. This is Attilis Gym. It opened its doors Monday morning at 8 a.m. It was such a big deal that even Fox News decided to cover the fact that a gym was opening. The co-owners, Ian Smith and Frank Trombetti, were immediately issued a court summons because they did violate the governor's stay-at-home order, but they stayed open. Customers got warnings, and it has since been closed, or rather, it had been closed since the stay-at-home order went in. We will see now what so here's the problem with these things, Pat. The gym is acting completely irresponsibly in the sense that gyms obviously are very high contagion places. You can go further than some places are willing to go by for example, reducing by 50% the number of treadmills so that the treadmills aren't right next to each other and putting plexiglass between I've seen gyms put plexiglass between treadmills in advance of reopening. Okay, you can do that stuff, but gyms are contagion centers. You could close the locker rooms and say you got to come right in and work out and then leave. You could do things, but it is not the first place that should be opening. So that's obviously a problem. But then the pendulum swings the other way when you start to get these cartoonish right-wing stories about, oh my God, they're prosecuting 2 gym dudes who are just running their business. This is what the court system is going to waste time on. And it also starts to resonate with people viscerally that like, wait, we're putting these people into the court system for opening a gym?
Yeah, and interestingly, the cops decided not to shut them down, which they had every right to do. And
Yes.
probably by the rule of the law, they should have done that, shut them down. They just gave them the court summons and left. So that's interesting, too. It makes me think that maybe the cops are in favor of what the gym owners were doing here. To throw the gym owners a bone here, they were putting in place some restrictions, like everyone had to wear a mask except when you're in the middle of your set.
Right.
And they also closed down the lockers and the showers. So it's not like they just wanted everyone to go at it and, see what happens. But certainly gyms are not essential businesses. I want to go back to the gym. We all want to go back to working out. But for now, we just have to make sure that only essential businesses are operating. And this is a state, New Jersey, that was the second hardest hit. So it makes sense that they would have to wait a little longer. I would maybe have a little bit more sympathy for the gym owners if they were out in Montana, which is a state that hasn't been as significantly impacted by the virus. But you got to follow the laws here. I mean, like if you want to advocate for opening up earlier, go ahead and do that. These gym owners also said that they were very upset watching Congress go back and forth with like passing these pork bills, but it seems like not enough money is going to small businesses and individuals. I have some sympathy for that argument. That sounds like a left-wing argument to me that we need more safety net spending and assistance for people at this time. But ultimately, I think these people are trying to act as heroes, and that's not what they're being. They're not really heroes.
Couple other things about the guidelines they put in place. They say that they were only operating at 20% capacity, which I guess means whatever the fire marshal says is the maximum number of people, you just divide that by 5. Now, the thing about that is very often the maximum number of people per the fire marshal is a really high number. Like, so for example, there's a lot of elevators where the elevator will say no more than 16 people in the elevator. But then you look at the elevator and you realize, once you get to 6 people, this would be really crowded. So just because you take the top legal capacity and only do 20%, the gym may often be at that capacity from a legal perspective, but it could still be a pretty damn crowded gym.
Yeah, and I've been in some very crowded gyms and restaurants and bars in my lifetime, and I've never seen the fire marshal show up and disperse everyone. That's just never happened to me. So, yeah, I totally agree that you could still have a pretty packed location that's only at 20% capacity.
One other thing, they are taking people's temperatures as they come in. And the weird thing about this gym is they're saying if you have a temperature above 100.4, you're going to be turned away. That's a fever. Like, why would you allow someone in with 100.1? That doesn't make any sense. Traditionally, 98.6 is considered like the line between a normal temperature and what would be a mild fever. Over time, we actually did a report, I think it was 6 months ago, Pat, about how the sort of like non-fever average body temperature has actually gone down into the mid to high 97s. My normal fever has always been like 97.4 has been my normal temperature. So to me, it seems crazy that only at 100.4 do you turn someone away. That's wacky.
Yeah, I mean, if you're above 98.6, you don't necessarily have to be turned away, I suppose. But if you're at 99.5, maybe that should be the limit. Ultimately, though, it's not their decision to make. Like they're just trying to make up their own rules here. But I think we see the problem with that.
In Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp has been criticized by health experts for prematurely reopening non-essential businesses in the state. I believe they started the reopening process in Georgia back on April 24th. And even Donald Trump at one point actually was saying, I think Brian Kemp is acting too quickly in Georgia. But we have now learned that some of the reports of the data of coronavirus in Georgia showed a decrease in new infections when in reality there was no such decrease going on. So even with the data they were making public, it was too soon to reopen, now we have learned that there were decreases in new infections being reported which were not real. And Brian Kemp is admitting this. He's not denying this is not now. In Florida, they're still officially denying the allegations about falsification of data. Brian Kemp is saying this happened, but that it was a mistake. It just happens to be a mistake that went in his favor.
Is there any chance of that?
I don't know.
I suppose if you actually break it down, yes, there's a possibility that they got the numbers wrong and they underestimated them. But it just seems very, very unlikely. And what should the repercussions be? Because I would imagine that any sort of penalties or charges or whatever would take place at the state level, and the state overall wants to reopen, and it's run by a Republican administration. So I don't see that happening.
Let me give one caveat. This was less about just releasing fraudulent numbers. They were releasing deceptive graphs where the x-axis was set up in such a way that it looked like a decline when it really wasn't. So it does stop short of straight up making up numbers, but they were visually representing the numbers in a way that gave the opposite impression of what was really going on. So maybe somebody just really did make a mistake with the graphing. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe that's how you lie with statistics. That's one of those things that you do where you make the x-axis or the y-axis very, very strange. And yeah, I think that at the end of the day, though, is this really going to matter? Because, even if they underestimate the amount of coronavirus cases and deaths that they have in the state, they're still going to have them. They're still going to reopen, and there's also still people are going to die and people are going to get sick. And so ultimately, those voters are going to have a sense of what's going on, and maybe that will cause them to make change come 2020, come the November election. So, you can make up the numbers. It's much like how we have an official case number here in the United States, but we know that the actual number is many, many times higher, maybe 5 times higher, maybe 10 times higher. We don't exactly know. But I think because people don't take these numbers all too seriously anyway, maybe it won't make that much of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think people certainly are looking more at trends. And that's why I think that the deceptive graphing is so effective, because it's very easy to just look at a graph and it's like, hey, that looks like a decline. Even if I don't pay specific attention to the numbers, it sort of looks like a decline, and that makes me feel pretty good about what's going on. My sense is that so there's the issue you bring up, Pat, which is we're not testing everyone, so we're only capturing, and if anywhere from 5 to 50% of cases are asymptomatic, or it's so mild someone doesn't even know they have it, we are obviously not capturing every case. That's absolutely true. The other side of it is, We now have allegations from Florida about falsifications of numbers. We have an admission from Georgia that the numbers were misrepresented on a graph. There are probably 10 or 15 states where similar things are almost certainly going on.
Yeah, and if we do see a spike in cases in Georgia and Florida and these other states that are opening up early, do you see these governors like Brian Kemp and Ron DeSantis saying, you know what, I made a mistake, we have to shut down again? Because I think that regardless of what happens, they're just going to stay open. I don't think they're going to go back to shutting down.
I think they will, if it gets bad enough, they will have to re-shut down some things. But I don't think they would just do a mea culpa and say, I screwed up and we got to shut it down. I think that
it's just the nature of the virus.
They would say, listen, the whole point of this was that we would put in place a way to track what's going on. And based on what's going on, here are 5 types of organizations that we are going to temporarily pause. You know, they would dress it up by saying this was all part of the plan. The system worked. We caught some hot spots. And now we're going to say no more churches for a little while and no more haircuts or whatever else. They will take the actions that the numbers justify, but they're never going to say, hey, guys, I screwed up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just like with Trump, it's the management by optics. It's the pretending that the problem doesn't exist. And that doesn't really work, unfortunately. And we're seeing that across the country.
It can work short term, but I think over the long term, it's not going to work and it's going to absolutely implode. Thank you for joining us on the bonus show today. We will be back tomorrow. What do we have tomorrow? Well, we've got a regular show. And then we will have a bonus show. It will be a day like many others tomorrow, and we'll see you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.